Hey, whoa, hold up. Hey everybody, this is Dr. Weaver again. For your spinal workshop, this day we are going to be talking about have you ever wondered if you can slow down the aging process? Or even if you could turn back the hands of time? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today is aging. Can we age gracefully? Can we slow the clock down? And what really is aging to begin with? So I'm Dr. Ryan Weaver. Today we're going to be talking about those things and what you can do to have a wonderful, functional life without the aches and pains of feeling old. So, aging. There are really three parts of this from birth till death is the growth process, maturity, and aging syndrome. So when you break this down specifically from Dr. Harry Sobel, a PhD, when does human aging actually start? And what they found were growth, mature, and aging syndrome, like I mentioned, is about protein in here. So the growth is when protein masses increase within the body. The maturity is the protein mass is constant and it remains that way for a very short period of time. And once you level off and protein mass increases, you actually then start the aging syndrome, which is where the protein mass again diminishes. So we go up, we peak, and we go back down. And we have irreversible loss of protein mass compared to the maturity state. So, aging. What's aging a byproduct of, and why does this happen? Well, four categories that we're going to discuss. The fourth one, we'll start with that one because we just went over it, protein mass decreases. The top three, third on the list, cellular damage, which is continual. Again, we'll get into each one of these specifically. Inflammation, probably going to spend most of the time on this. And this simmers over years, and we have a lot of collateral damage as the decades progress. And then time, the process. So time is the damage sustained over time stimulates other bad events. Life, things happen, traumas, again, thoughts, toxins, three things that we say make up subluxations. Inflammatory systems, these are, in the short term, a really, really good thing to protect us from invaders, around injuries, but in the long term, it becomes an issue. Cellular damage, we know that our chromosomal structures, the shortening of telomeres is what those are. There's only a certain amount that they can divide over time. And I mentioned this earlier, again, the decreased protein mass, which can be caused by lack of exercise, GI issues, malnutrition, cell loss. So, I want you to think about this. Probably one that you're all familiar with is the Epstein-Barr virus. Almost all of us as adults have this at some point, and it's usually laying dormant or latent state hiding in our cells. Yet a viral immunologist from the one and only the Ohio State University Medical Center found evidence that with age, antibodies to these viruses increase, indicating a reawakened virus in an active immune system. So I want to compare that in an example. I mentioned subluxation earlier, thoughts, traumas, and toxins. A subluxation are latent. And I have this conversation with all of my patients is just because we don't have a symptom or a sign doesn't mean that something's dysfunctional or not working properly, if there's a dysfunction in our body. And a subluxation, these can happen. We often say the first one's from birth. So, why we adjust babies and infants. There's a lot of trauma that goes on, bringing a child into the world. So, again, back to the basics. Just because we don't have a sign or symptom doesn't mean that something isn't functioning at its highest or optimal level. So, continuing on through here. Talking about our systems, nervous system, respiratory system, GI system, urinary, respiratory, all these things. So when do we actually observe these in our life declining? Well, the first one is our nervous system. From 20 years old, 100 billion cells. Then at age 40, we lose up to 10,000 cells a day. I said that right, a day. That's 1 to 3 million per year after the age of 40. Respiratory system, same thing, 20 years of age. Muscles of the ribs become stiffer, breathing function decreases, okay? Typically by age 40, we start to notice like a shortness of breath. Circulatory system, 40 years old, our blood vessels become less elastic. Deposits such as, fatty deposits, cholesterol, and again, start hearing like heart attack, our blood vessels constricted, not getting as much blood flow through there. Our GI system significantly drops good bacteria after age 55. In the urinary system, age 65, our bladder capacity reduces from 2 cups at age 30 to 1 cup at age 70. And our urethra, the walls become thinner and weaker. So, fun things to put in perspective, and you hear this, maybe I don't have as much energy, it's harder to breathe, shortness of breath, even, a question to all of you. As you become older, do you feel like you have more heartburn, more indigestion? How about eyesight, hearing loss, forgetfulness? Do you go to the bathroom more frequently? Things like that we look at in terms of aging. So inflammation, the one I said that we're going to spend the most amount of time on. Inflammation causes chronic disease. I've talked about this way, I believe, back in a previous Spinal workshop about nutrition and C-reactive protein, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. Inflammation causes chronic disease. Low-grade chronic inflammation is a better predictor of coronary heart disease, and it's better than high cholesterol and high blood pressure, okay? So I kind of jumped ahead here to the C-reactive protein. So long-term, low-grade inflammation, okay? Inflammation has been linked to the insulin resistance syndrome, also known as diabetes. 2 large studies have suggested that markers of low-grade chronic inflammation independently predict those at a high risk for type 2 diabetes. These are probably 2 things that I see if any patients ever bring me any blood reports. So we see risk of C-reactive proteins up, inflammation's up. Typically type 2 diabetes is right there. All right. All of these factors, inflammation causes aging. Sticking with inflammation. Waste products accumulate in the cells, connective tissue elasticity reduces. Earlier I mentioned blood vessels do the same there. Chromosomal damage, so we're going to talk about telomere length here in just a moment. But aging causes inflammation. Inflammation can occur even without an invader, like the body does with atherosclerosis. In response to fatty deposits on our arterial walls, a type of phagocyte called a macrophage identifies trouble spots and infiltrates them, swelling the fatty deposits. These lesions can break open, resulting in a blood clot. Again, then we can end up with a heart attack. The more active the macrophages are, the more C-reactive protein in the bloodstream, the more likely the lesions will be to break. Block the arteries, and we can end up with a heart attack. So, C-reactive protein, that is one of the biggest markers of inflammation. So what can we do? How can we, reduce this inflammation? Well, obviously, adjustments. We need to check if the swelling and edema that happens with a subluxation, such as a vertebral subluxation of the spine, this results in the production and release of small molecules, that being neuropeptides that can create this inflammation. Adjustments restore the biomechanics, meaning that our spine can work the way that it was intended to, which will then reduce inflammation. So again, when you're palpating up through a spine or, any joint, if there's inflammation around there, that can also be a cause or a result of a joint being subluxated, that we have that irritation around that joint. So adjustments. Number 2, stress. We gotta get rid of the mental stress. High cortisol levels increase inflammation. 3, exercise at minimum 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week. Water, plenty of water. We gotta keep flushing ourselves, flush everything out. Eat healthy foods. The biggest one that I'm a stickler on are pro-inflammatory foods, the biggest ones being sugars, high processed foods, things like that. Almost complete here. A few other things. So, most of the time that you hear that somebody has inflammations, you're going to probably take maybe an NSAID, right? Talked about this the week prior with arthritis and how that actually makes things worse in the long term. NSAIDs, non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, are some of the most common pain relievers available. They include over-the-counter medications like aspirin, ibuprofen, naproxen, but they're also available in prescription strength. These not only relieve pain, but they reduce inflammation, lower fever, prevent blood clotting. Since reducing inflammation is a key to treating musculoskeletal pain, NSAIDs are considered first line of treatment, right? What I just said previously. The American Gastroenterological Association, the Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology and Hepatology, chronic users of NSAIDs have increased risk of bleeding and visible damage to the small lining of the intestines. So you typically hear GI bleeds. 71%, this was pretty shocking, showed visible signs of damage in the intestines after only 90 days of NSAID usage. More people die from NSAID-related complications than from AIDS and cervical cancer in the United States. 16,500 per year and 103,000 hospitalizations from NSAIDs, at least that were listed. So, my closing to telomere length. I mentioned muscle mass earlier. We lose 1 to 3% muscle mass per decade after the age of 50. So again, 30 minutes, 3 times a week, regular weightlifting training. But sorry, back to the DNA repair, thiol length, and telomeres. So the study of the indicator of DNA repair is serum thiol. Sorry, I said telomere length earlier. Serum thiol is what I meant to say. Serum thiol, after long-term chiropractic intervention, showed that DNA repair can occur regardless of age with regular chiropractic care. The serum thiol levels were highest in the group with 52 to 312 weeks of chiropractic care regardless of age. So, we know that we can slow things down and help DNA repair. Chiropractic adjustments, plenty of water, mental stress, get rid of that, exercise, proper nutrition. All of these things we talk about all the time in our office. Some research about America, the US. In 2010, the US ranked 36th in life expectancy, which was 77.28. Was 78.3 in 2010. Just check this again today. The US, as of 2020, we went from 36th to 46th in the rankings, and our life expectancy went from 78.3 to 77.2. Basically, we lost a year. We don't live in a third world country. I really haven't referenced this much this year, but I did last year. Duke University study said the #1 cause of death in our country is poorly made choices. Just as you've learned today, some of the choices, maybe, hey, let's take an NSAID, and take an ibuprofen every day doesn't really bother anybody. That we see these things, and you need to be informed and make the right choices. So I hope that some of this was a new lesson for you and that you learned some new things. I only covered about half of what I really wanted to cover for time purposes. And, we may do a part 2 of aging gracefully. So I hope that you find this valuable information and that you value your health where it is now and start making healthier choices, not simply waiting till we have a symptom or disease. So I hope you have a wonderful week this week. God bless you all. Have a great spring. We just kicked that off, and hopefully we'll see you all soon again. Take care.